ready for our conclusion now, episode 3 with Rabbi Wolpe. I think this is going to be well worth your time. I hope you'll continue to stay with us. This antisocial behavior that we see daily, how much of that is connected in your mind to a society that has drifted away from
traditional forms of it?
Yes.
The reason I'm smiling is not because those things aren't troubling, but because I want to start with the optimistic read of this.
Okay.
Steven Pinker,
Great.
who says, and he's right, Steven Pinker, who's a professor at Harvard and has written a bunch of books like The Better Angels of Our Nature that gives an optimistic read to human history, says things like, he compares the murder rate in the worst city in the world now. It's still infinitely better than medieval London. And he points out that anecdotes have much more currency with us than data. But actually data, in the end, like the fact that we've cut world hunger by over 50% in the past several years. Nobody knows that because it's never a headline, world hunger cut by 50%.
Yes.
So I want to say that in a lot of ways, the world has gotten much, much better without negating what you're saying.
Yes.
Now that I've given my optimistic spin, let me talk about the catastrophes.
I'm asking you, when we see people, young people, walking into retail stores.
Yes.
With no shame, brazen, audacious.
So I have two things.
Shoplifting, stealing, taking, hitting, pushing, spitting, throwing.
Right. So I have two things to say about that. First of all, the larger breakdown of social trust has a lot to do, I believe, with the algorithms of the internet, with the fact that it encourages performative selves over genuine, authentic selves, that it maximizes for conflict, and that it gives you the sense that society's all out of control. And once you have that sense that society's out of control, then individuals who don't have their own guardrails act however they want, and you get people walking into stores and just taking stuff, and they don't care the cameras are on.
They don't care.
No, it doesn't matter.
But, beautifully said, Rabbi. I see why you're...
I hear the butt coming down the highway.
No, you're good
at
this.
All right.
You speak beautifully
Thank you.
logically. But Rabbi, do you have any doubt that the people that are taking these things, and today now, very kind of interesting, you see young women doing it.
Yes.
It used to be
young men.
Young men,
exclusively.
Right? Exclusively young men.
Yeah.
Today, 30-40% of the people can be young women. Do you have any doubt, Rabbi, that the people doing this likely didn't go to Sunday school the week before, or didn't get raised in a home in which the Ten Commandments were posted, or a school in which the Ten Commandments were posted? Is that confusing at all to you?
No, not at all. I mean, there's no question that there is a social capital that religion creates. That Will Herberg, who was a Jewish philosopher, used to say that losing religion in a society gives you what he called cut flower ethics.
Yes.
Flowers will stay in bloom if they're in the soil.
Yes.
At least in theory, or plants will.
Watered and sun.
Watered and sun. If you cut them, they will stay in bloom for a little while, but eventually they'll wither and wilt and die.
So that is an example if you give somebody roses or something.
Exactly. Give them roses, they'll last for
Week.
a couple. Yeah.
And you are making the point, cut flower ethics is a conversation or analogy about how if you cut people from the transcendent laws, don't be surprised that in some quick amount of time,
especially when there are other social pressures that are pushing people to do bad things.
Like what? Like the internet?
Like the internet, and also like the fact that breakdown is contagious. So,
Breakdown
in
is
other words, if you,
contagious.
to introduce another analogy, James Q. Wilson had this broken windows theory, which
I'm
is
somewhat familiar with it.
which is if you go through a neighborhood and you see a couple broken windows, you think nobody's tending this place, and
The
you
bad
yourself,
guys are in charge.
You yourself are more likely to act lawlessly because you figure place is what we'd call in Jewish talk hefker. It's like nobody cares, nobody's paying attention.
Right.
So he said when a window is broken, you should fix it immediately because it sends that signal. And in a place like some of our major cities, there are a lot of broken windows, either literally or metaphorically. And so that bad behavior even starts to encourage people who in other conditions might not.
That's what.
So, and I worry about that too. So some people would say, yes, I'm shoplifting. I know it's objectively wrong. I know I'm acting as a criminal. I'm doing something that's wrong.
Yeah.
And then there are people who are sociologically revolutionaries. They're saying, it's not wrong for me to do this. I don't acknowledge the validity of the law. If you don't believe in some kind of law, whether social or transcendent, then yes, everything is a matter of personal opinion.
Do you believe that many of the people shoplifting or doing even worse, many worse things, would justify their behavior and saying it's not wrong because Walmart's been ripping off
No question. That's exactly what they would say.
Yeah, they would justify, I'm not shoplifting. I'm taking back what belongs to me.
Yes.
And
because nobody likes to think of themselves as bad. And that's how social institutions get broken down, and eventually societies do.
Do you think that the leadership of this nation that you witnessed today in 2023, both parties,
now you're hitting something
are
where it's hard for me to be optimistic. No, I do not see the quality and depth and integrity of leadership that is required by the severity of our problems right now. I don't. I wish I did.
I agree with you.
And maybe tomorrow someone will come along that you and I don't, we know the name now, but we don't know the person, maybe, but I don't see it so far.
It seems so much of the leadership of both parties is engaged in something, I guess, that could be referred to as pandering.
Yeah, and people
just telling people what they want to hear so they'll vote for them.
Emerson once said to Thoreau, do we always have to talk for victory instead of truth? And I feel like that's what the two parties are doing. We need to win. You could do the best thing in the world. You could, like tomorrow, invent a cure for cancer. And if I'm on the opposite party, I would say, look at that, all those poor patients who were doing fine, and you just invented this terrible thing.
Rabbi, talk for a minute about your book that did the best of the 8 books you've written. You had one that was particularly commercially successful. Talk about that and its principal and its central lesson.
So it was called Making Loss Matter, Creating Meaning in Difficult Times. And it was actually based on a sermon that my father gave once, where he talked about how there is a yizkor, which is a memorial service for people who died.
Yep.
But there isn't a service for things that die while we're still alive. And I thought that was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Like dreams that die. Or people who are immigrants who've lost their home country and their home language. We have so many losses in our lives.
Yeah.
And the central lesson of the book is that a lot of times people will search for the reason why something happened when they would be much better off making the loss meaningful in their lives, because you can't change the fact that you lost except in as much as you can make it meaningful. So people who start charities for diseases when they lost somebody that they loved for the disease, they don't know why it happened to that person, but they know they can do something with it that will make other lives better. And here, I want to tell you a very brief and beautiful story that I love to tell, that a Rabbi Hugo Grin, who grew up in Auschwitz, used to tell all the time about when he was a little kid in Auschwitz with his father. and it was Hanukkah, the time of lighting the candles at the winter festival, and his father took the margarine ration that they had for food, and he used it as oil to light the Chanukiah, the menorah for Hanukkah. And Grin said, as a child, he said to his father, "How can you do this? This is our food. We're practically starving here." And his father said to him, "My child, we have learned that you can go for 3 weeks without food. You can go for 3 days without water, but you can't go for 3 minutes without hope." And that, I think, is what religion at its deepest core does for human beings, is it gives them hope that this isn't meaningless, it isn't empty, what you do matters.
That was wonderful.
And that it'll make a difference.
Rabbi, we're going to close by inviting you to try to tell, you're still a young man. What does the future hold for you? Although we don't know what the future holds, but what is your intention for the next 10 years? What's left to accomplish? Where have you...
So I've seen a lot. I mean, I had a brain tumor. I've had 2 neurosurgeries. I had lymphoma. I feel like every day that I'm still alive is actually a tremendous gift. I feel like I'm living on borrowed time. We all are. I used to say to my congregation,
by a man with a brain tumor who's an optimist. That is...
I used to say to my congregation, we all have had a terminal diagnosis. It's just that I know it. So what I would like to be able to do in the next 10 years, if given the chance, and I hope starting next year, is to take the same sorts of messages that I gave to the congregation, to give them to the Jewish world and to beyond the Jewish world, because I think
in what forum?
In writing, in speaking, in whatever way I can, whatever
so you are
venue
leaving,
I find. I'm leaving here next year. I'll be at Harvard Divinity School as a visiting scholar for a year, and then after that, I'm working with a couple different organizations, and I'll be emeritus rabbi here.
If you're trying to convert me to optimism, maybe the fact that Harvard still has a divinity school could be a good... That could be...
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's going to be a very interesting... my culture is not exactly the same as the one that I understand prevails there.
Perhaps.
It's going to be very interesting to see what that's going to be like.
Perhaps.
But yeah, so here's my greatest hope is that I will be able to move through the world, and again, to go back to Emerson, whom I love, he said that the trick is to be the same in the marketplace as you are in your study. Everybody in their study has integrity because they're alone. So in the congregation, I've been able to be more or less a consistent person. I want to be able to carry that beyond the congregation into the world.
You're going to be leaving here, you're going to Harvard
just
for a year.
Yeah.
And then writing, and then book, and then other formats. Could be the internet, could be...
Yes, we'll see.
It'll be interesting. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You were an outstanding guest, and your authenticity, your transparency, your vulnerability was exceptional. So I feel like...
Thank you.